Houston Kold has quickly gained over 70,000 Instagram followers. He is well known for his extremely unique editing style, and the best way to learn any style in the world is by mimicking other style and replicating it to near perfection. So let's break down this edit frame by frame. I'm now in After Effects. I have a new composition with 1820 by 1920. This is a 9 by 16 aspect ratio, 24 frames per second, and roughly 6 seconds long for this clip. I've dragged in the original video so I can go frame by frame and ensure my edit is accurate. First, I'll trim the clip to just get the animation part. Here we go. The first step is to make a new camera. Let's go with the OneNote camera 50mm preset. Now let's put in the people are text. Right click and choose text. Type people are. Let's use the Baby's new font and change it to white. This looks similar to the original. Hit 3D and move the text behind the camera. Position it properly. Next, let's make the red square. Go to a new shape layer and use the rectangle tool. Hit Q a couple of times if you don't have a rectangle. Then drag it to make a square. Hold shift to make it a perfect square. We don't need a stroke, but we do need a fill color. Pick a red fill color. Add some roundedness as there is rounding on the original square. Make the roundedness value 38 and that looks good. Ensure your layer is 3D and move it behind the camera. To center the anchor point so that we can rotate it around the center, go to the anchor point and double click while holding Alt or Option. This should center the anchor point to the layer's content. Line it up with the original square by rotating it on the Z axis and scaling it to a match. Let's animate the basic camera movement like in Houston's video. Make a keyframe at the start. We can see in the background how the video moves and rotates. So keyframe the rotation at the start to roughly 20 degrees. Go to the end and keyframe it at 0 degrees rotation. Make sure the keyframes are set to easy ease. We don't have a background yet, so let's add that. Use a solid layer with an off-white color. Make it 3D and move it back on the Z axis a bit. Scale it up to fill the background. You can see the red rectangle stroke comes in around here. So let's make a new shape for that. Move it below the camera and red square. Draw it and add some rounding. In the main video, Houston likely keyframed the scale, so keyframe it where it comes in. Go to the last frame and scale it down. You can see it's not looking great right now, but hang on. Let's move this new shape behind the red square. Scale it up more until it looks right. Highlight these keyframes with F9 and ease them for smoother animation. The stroke is poking out too early, so drag the start of the layer to where it should begin. My text looks a bit small compared to his. We'll do a sketchy fix by keyframing the scale. Go a few frames forward and scale it up a bit. It's not perfect but hard to notice. Now we need to add the people walking. I found a random video and imported it. Apply the key light effect and click the green color to extract that person. Make this layer 3D and line it up with the people in the original. Duplicate this layer and reposition the copies to match with the other people. Do this a few more times, then duplicate all of them. Flip them horizontally and reposition to fill out the other side. Adjust positioning as needed to match the original depth. Houston has a slight drop shadow, so I'll add that to one person. These are my settings, which I'll copy and paste to the other people layers, even though you can't see them at all. Let's add a glow effect to the people are text using deep glow, which is what he uses. That's looking good. On the white background layer, let's add a fill effect. Keyframe it from off-white color to black after one frame. Let's do the same thing for the red graphics. Turn them on and add a fill effect. Keyframe it from red to blue rather than one frame. Then I'll copy and paste those keyframes. When it changes to black, this blue stroke changes to a smaller square here. So I'll keyframe the scale by hitting S and go one frame forward and scale it down. I'll also keyframe the position and move it lower. Now it changes color, size and position. Let's change the color for the people walking layers too. Add fill and keyframe it from black to an off-white color after one frame. You can see the people are text changes to black and gets stretched horizontally. I'll do that by duplicating the text layer and expanding it. Finally, the iconic red square also gets stretched horizontally. So I'll adjust that shape layer scale over those same frames. Now let's stretch and move the red square over a bit. I'll keyframe the scale and position. For some reason it moves over in Houston's video, so I'll do that as well. The people are text is only there for one frame when it goes black. So I'll set the text layer to be visible for just that one frame. Next we need to add the text willing. I'll duplicate the people art text layer, remove any keyframes and change the font to match the original. I'll type willing and scale it up to line it with Houston's version. Let's extend the willing text to be longer for now. You can tell in Houston's video that it looks a little cooler, right? Obviously, that's due to a lot of overlays and other effects that I'll get into later. Right now mine looks pretty plain, but the core animation is there. It'll look good by the end. You can see how the people walking turn into a kind of a golden color. So let's do that. Go back a frame and keyframe the color to off-white. Then go forward a frame, set it to a very subtle gold color. He's using a gradient on it. It doesn't really matter since it's such a quick shot before it goes back to black. I'll keyframe the color again and set it to black after one more frame. He has a kind of a platform that the people are walking on with a blue shadow. So we can add a drop shadow to the blue square. Change the color to blue and the direction to 180 degrees. Increase the distance a ton and change the softness a bit. Then scale the opacity down quite a bit. Something like that looks good. Make sure to keyframe the drop shadow's opacity so it's at 0 during the whole white portion before it appears. You could go in and make a more accurate skewed rectangle shape, but honestly it doesn't even matter since the clip is so quick that anything will work. I've noticed that in his video, it's still zooming in by the time you get to right about here. So all we have to do is move our camera keyframe to keep zooming until this point. The blue square starts to grow and then turns white. So let's keyframe the blue square's scale to increase over these frames. I'll also keyframe the position, going back a frame and moving it upwards. Let's make a few more changes so it just turns white. I'll open up the fill property on the blue square layer and keyframe it from blue to white over one frame. You can see the blue stroke box disappears. So instead of letting it hang out, I'll keyframe the opacity and make it 0 after one frame so it disappears when everything moves up. I didn't really like the slow scaling, so I adjusted the keyframe too. In his video, you can see the willing text moves up a bit. So let's keyframe the position and scale just like that. So far it's looking pretty good. You can see that once the white hits, there's a small blue rectangle in front of the big white rectangle. Let's make the shape layer. I'll draw a rough rectangle, increase the stroke width and change the color. I'll make it 3D and move it behind the camera for now. Let's change the color again to something better. Now I can go where it turns white, turn that layer to start here. Scale it up and move it forward to the Z-axis until it looks right. There's also a white square that comes in right around here. So let's draw that shape too. I'll make a new 3D square shape and hold shift to estimate the size. Change the stroke color to white. I'll need to play with the position, bringing it way forward on the Z-axis initially. It has to come down quite a bit. So I'll scale it back on Z and increase the size slightly. It should move up a bit when it comes in. So I'll adjust the position keyframes. Cool. Let's increase the stroke weight because it's pretty faint. I'm going to boost it up and then copy over the glow effect from the people art text so it has the same glow. Here's what we have so far. To add in the to spend text, I duplicate the willing text, change the color to red and move the position way back on the Z-axis initially. So it animates as the camera zooms, similar to his version. Houston's to spend text animate is one letter at a time. So we can do that too. I'll go to the text layer, click animate and go to the opacity property. I'll change it down to 0. Use the range selector to set the start position where the text finishes coming in and boost it up to 100%. Now it animates in letter by letter. Now we can add some of the trademark effects that Houston is known for. First, add an adjustment layer and apply the posterized time effect, changing the frame rate to 16. This will give it a really cool hand-drawn vintage effect. Then add your glow or deep glow effect with settings like these to make everything seem more cohesive in Houston style. You can see how increasing the glow blends everything together, but obviously don't overdo it. And another adjustment layer with the vignette effect using settings like these to help center the action. Lastly, add an adjustment layer with optics compensation, reversing the lens distortion and increasing it. But don't push it too far. Then use the free plugin, Chromatic Aberration 3, which gives a cool 3D effect on the edge, helping blend everything. But don't boost it too much as well. Finally, add an oval mask with a decent feather amount to vignette the edges a bit. Make sure all the layers have motion blur enabled and turn on the top motion blur filter as well. If you need more motion blur, increase the shutter angle in the composition settings to something like 200 degrees. A lot of his videos have an overlay. So I added a film scratch effect set to lighten mode and the opacity turned all the way down. This just helps make it more interesting and adds a lot more depth. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on recreating Houston Kold style animation. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments below. And don't forget to smash that subscribe button. See you next time.